Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 379 of CryptoBiography, and it's part 2 of Repercussions. And here we go. She started with the two names she knew. One was Catherine Martin. It didn't surprise her that Catherine was in on the investigation of the killing of a billionaire. She was a security expert that had helped out the ultra-wealthy for over a decade. And she'd worked with Catherine before. Twice. They'd been similar instances. She'd needed someone who could get in a place. Not to kill, just to place a bug, but the place was very hard to get in. When she'd done so the first time so well that nothing had even been suspected, she got the second job and did it just as well. One would think this would lead to more jobs, but as it turned out, Catherine had gotten some intel on what her real job was. That seemed to scare her off, because she had never contacted her again. She'd found out about Catherine's intel from a friend who knew the situation. But she was able to confirm where Catherine lived within an hour, and over the next day she made a plan. Catherine was called away on a job that night. She had arranged it. The job was real enough so that Catherine wouldn't suspect it was done to lure her away from home. She'd learned what security systems were at her place. She defeated a window alarm easily and slipped inside. She took a moment and let her senses sharpen. She heard nothing untoward, and so moved out. Knowing the sort of computer security that Catherine had paid off. She was in the system within minutes, and then placed a very quiet malware that would send her, anonymously, a wealth of information. This included things already on the system, and also future data. She slipped out and made sure the window alarm was back on its usual setting. With luck, nothing would have been noticed, and the spyware would do its job for a good long time. And it did. She gathered a lot of intel over the next few weeks from that job. While the information was pouring in, she looked at the other person whose name she knew from the list, William Danforth. He was old money, but over the decades the money had run thin. He was known to take jobs occasionally, if the money was good enough and the work light enough. She considered offering him a job anonymously, but she was not willing to part with the amount that would entice such a man. He was paranoid, too. She'd met him at a party about 3 years before. He spent the party checking the doors and windows and all the guests. He even caught her looking at him one time. She used it as an excuse to go up and talk to him. Enjoying the party? Not really. Shame, a lot of powerful people here tonight. There were a lot of people with some money there, but not the kind that actually ran things. She was testing him. He passed the test with a scoffing sound. Pfft. Sure. If you're not interested, you're not interested, was all she said, and disengaged. But she'd learned plenty. And a few quick checks showed that he had this kind of security she wouldn't be able to waltz in on, not like Catherine. So she bided her time on him. He likely wouldn't be important. He was always looking for a payday and for doing as little as possible. He wouldn't show any initiative. Someone had probably seen him being paranoid and thought he would make a good investigator. But he wouldn't. She had nothing to fear from him, but also probably nothing to gain from him either. So she watched Catherine's intel roll in. She was especially looking for anything about the other 5 names on the list. She also had a few feelers on her own about them, but she had to be careful there. She didn't want one of her sources getting a second payday by ratting her out. 2 weeks after she had visited Catherine's place, some emails had been exchanged between Catherine and another one of the names on her list, Franklin Adams. It was what they had said that interested her. There was nothing definite, but some references to our ongoing search and planned meetings and indeterminate motive. That last bit worried her. While cops sometimes did use motive in their searches, she did not think these people were on any sort of official search, whether Swiss, international, or any other kind. But the people who looked into crimes privately only ever cared about finding out who it was, usually so bloody vengeance could be wreaked upon the perpetrator. But these people also wanted to know why. She passed the time by doing a minor job. A small-time criminal had gotten released from prison and was threatening his ex-girlfriend. This sort of common thing wasn't a hobby of hers. She didn't look for these creeps on her own, or she'd have no time to be doing anything else. But this ex-girlfriend happened to have a wealthy uncle with connections, and one of those connections reached out to her. The pay was good, which it had to be. Most people who took out a slime ball like this did it for less than 5 figures, but she was going to take any kind of job, let alone with a life sentence attached if she was caught, for peanuts. For the kind of money this uncle paid, she did the job and did it well. The creep had, in fact, just beaten up the ex-girlfriend again the day before. He was laying low, but that just meant staying in his house and drinking. He walked right past her, in the shadows between the door to his bedroom and the open door to the closet, and he hadn't even seen her. She stepped out silently behind him, put a thin steel spike into his brainstem, and spent only a little time making it look like it had been an accident. The guy had a messy house, and it wasn't difficult to make it look like he'd tripped and fallen and hurt himself on a bit of trash he kept, even in his bedroom. She also knew how the cops operated. Once they saw he was a dirtbag who had robbed an old lady and beaten up his own girlfriend, they would look for any excuse to close the books on this one as an accident. Within 10 minutes of his death, she'd left. The remainder of her pay was transferred to her the next morning, and that was that. It had made a nice diversion from wondering who was after her. And that's the story for this week. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying writing it. And if you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or X, Twitter, X, or Mastodon. And thanks for listening. Words and music copyright 2024, Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.